You become powerful when you learn to respond with silence. Silence is the language of inner mastery. There are many languages spoken in the world, but none as powerful as the language of silence. It is not taught in classrooms, and it is rarely praised by the masses. Yet, the one who has come to know silence has found a key to an invisible gate, a gate that leads inward where real power dwells, beyond noise, beyond impulse, beyond the clamor of the ego. The world measures strength in volume. In debates we look for the louder voice, in arguments the more dominant tone seems to win, but true mastery does not shout, it whispers, and when necessary it does not even whisper, it remains still. This stillness is not void, it is full of presence, of understanding, of readiness. You see, the immature mind rushes to speak. It defends, it reacts, it seeks to validate itself with words, but the mature mind pauses. It listens not only to others, but to the echo of its own thoughts, and when it chooses silence, it does so not from fear, but from wisdom. That silence becomes a declaration, not of surrender, but of sovereignty. Consider the mountain. Does it argue with the wind? No, it stands silent and unmoved. Yet all life respects its presence. The mountain's silence is its power. The river may roar, but the mountain remains. So too must you learn to dwell in silence, not as a weakness, but as a declaration of your unshakable ground. When someone offends you, and you respond with silence, not from suppression, but from mastery, you claim power over your reactions. You do not hand your peace over to their chaos. You do not let the noise outside distort the calm within. This is the beginning of true inner discipline. To speak is easy, but to remain silent, especially when every part of you wants to react, is an act of spiritual strength. It requires the ability to hold energy within rather than let it leak outward wastefully. Silence becomes a container. It contains your power, your energy, your grace, and in this containment, something remarkable happens. You begin to observe. You begin to notice patterns of speech, of behavior, of emotion. You stop being the storm and become the sky watching it. In silence, you see things as they are, not as your ego imagines them to be. This clarity is the seed of transformation. Therefore, practice silence, not only outwardly but inwardly. Still the need to always defend yourself. Quiet the craving to be right. Mute the constant stream of inner commentary. In the pause, you will meet yourself. And when you meet yourself, you meet the real source of your strength. Words can mislead, but silence tells the truth. It reveals who is reacting and who is responding. It shows you whether you are acting from impulse or from awareness, and it gives you space, the sacred space in which true decisions are made, not from fear, not from anger, but from understanding. So train yourself to speak less and listen more, not just to others, but to the world around you, to your breath, to the space between sounds, and in that deep listening, allow silence to become your teacher. For it is in silence that the deepest truths are heard. Let others wonder what you are thinking. Let them expect a reaction and give none. Let your silence disturb their assumptions, but inside you, let there be peace, calm, and unwavering focus. This is the discipline of the warrior, not the warrior who fights with fists, but the one who conquers within. True mastery does not shout, it watches, it waits, and when it speaks, it does so with precision, purpose, and peace. But often it doesn't speak at all. It allows silence to be the answer because it knows. Silence speaks louder than anything that can be said. The still mind is stronger than the loud voice. Power is often mistaken for noise. In a world obsessed with making a point, winning an argument, or dominating a room, loudness is mistaken for influence. But look deeper, and you will find that the true source of strength is not found in the loud voice, but in the still mind. Stillness is not absence, it is presence without disturbance. A pond that is undisturbed reflects the moon perfectly, but when stirred, its surface breaks and distorts. So too is the mind. When agitated, it distorts reality, reacts impulsively, and causes harm. But when still, it becomes a mirror, clear, reflective, and wise. The loud voice often comes from fear, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being unseen, fear of being irrelevant. So it raises its tone, exaggerates its presence, and dominates others to feel secure. But the still mind needs no such performance. It is not threatened. It does not need to prove itself. It knows what it is, and that is enough. Consider the tree in the storm. The branches sway, the leaves are tossed, but the trunk remains rooted. That rootedness is not in sound, but in silence, in the quiet strength that comes from depth, not from surface turbulence. This is what you must cultivate within yourself, the ability to remain grounded, even when the winds of emotion and conflict howl around you. People will shout, they will provoke, they will try to pull you into their storm, but you must resist the urge to match their volume. Let your mind remain still like a lake in the morning light. Reflect, observe, understand, but do not react. In this discipline, you will realize how powerful you truly are, because true strength is not reactive, it is responsive, and the space between stimulus and response is stillness. It is the pause that allows understanding to bloom. It is the breath before the word. It is the moment in which ego is dissolved and awareness takes its place. The loud voice is quick to speak, but slow to listen. The still mind listens first, not only to others, but to itself. It recognizes the emotion rising, the thought forming, and chooses consciously whether to act or remain silent. This conscious restraint is not suppression. It is wisdom in motion. You will encounter moments in life where being loud may feel satisfying, but rarely is it transformative. Anger may win an argument, but it never wins peace. Stillness, on the other hand, may not dominate a room, but it changes the room. It disarms hostility, neutralizes tension, and invites deeper dialogue. It is the silent presence that speaks without needing words. Think of the candle in a dark room. It does not scream to be seen, it simply is, and everything around it adjusts to its light. Your still mind is this candle. It does not need to dominate, it simply needs to shine, and in its calm radiance others will find themselves quieted, softened, and even inspired. There will always be voices louder than yours, faster than yours, more assertive than yours. But never let that deceive you into thinking they are stronger. Volume is not vision, speed is not certainty, and aggression is not authority. What the world truly respects, though it may not always recognize it, is the individual who moves with quiet clarity. So let your practice be this. Each day, seek a moment of stillness, even if just for a few breaths. Let your thoughts settle. Let your judgments soften. Let your need to speak be replaced by the desire to listen. The more you do this, the more you anchor yourself in unshakable strength. And when life challenges you, and it will return to the stillness, let your actions come from it. Let your words be shaped by it. And let your decisions rise from its depth. For the still mind does not conquer others, it conquers itself, and in doing so, it becomes the strongest presence in any space it enters. True power does not rise with noise, it deepens with silence. The deeper you go within, the less you need to shout. The still mind is unshaken, unprovoked, and unwavering, and that indeed is strength. Silence is not weakness, it is reserved strength. There is a misconception in the world, a dangerous one, that silence equates to weakness. That to remain quiet is to surrender, that to not respond is to lose, but look deeper and you will see that silence is not absence, it is presence restrained, it is strength held back, not because it is lacking, but because it is measured. A wild river rushes loudly, it splashes against its banks, consuming everything in its way, but the deepest water flows in silence. It does not need to announce its depth, it does not crave acknowledgement. And yet when it moves the earth. This is the nature of reserved strength. Many people rush to express, to argue, to defend. They believe their words are weapons, their volume a shield. But those who have walked the inner path, those who have cultivated discipline of thought and spirit, know that the strongest one in the room is not the loudest, but the quietest, the one who can contain their energy instead of unleashing it without direction. To be silent when provoked is not cowardice, it is wisdom. It is to recognize that not every battle is worth fighting, not every accusation worth answering, and not every insult worth carrying. The silence in such moments is a reflection of inner discipline, a signal that you no longer dance to the tune of external chaos. Imagine a martial artist who has trained for decades. They do not fight every time someone threatens them. Their confidence is not reactive. It is still, measured, grounded. This is what silence is. It is the readiness that needs no declaration. It is the strength that need not prove itself through noise. To practice silence is to practice restraint, and restraint is a form of power. Anyone can react. It takes no training to shout back when insulted, to argue when challenged, to lash out when hurt. But it takes training, a deep, consistent training of the mind and heart, to remain still, calm, and centered in the face of provocation. Let us be clear, silence is not passivity, it is not inaction, it is preparation. It is the space between the breath where clarity forms. It is the decision to act from wisdom, not emotion. In silence, you gather yourself. You return to center. You remember who you are. The untrained mind wants to release energy as soon as it arises. But the disciplined mind holds it, examines it, and decides with intention. This gap between the rise of emotion and the expression of it is where silence lives, and in that gap, true power is born. Have you noticed how the most respected individuals speak the least? They do not waste words. They do not rush to speak. When they do speak, the room quiets, not because their voice is loud, but because their silence has already spoken. That is the effect of reserved strength. It commands attention without requesting it. So train yourself in this way. When insulted, pause. When misunderstood, wait. When challenged, remain centered. Let your silence reveal your maturity. Let your quiet confidence unsettle those who expect noise. You are not obligated to explain yourself to every misunderstanding. You are not required to match chaos with more chaos. When you master this, you begin to live in a state of effortless strength. You no longer need to argue to be seen. You no longer crave to be heard. Your presence becomes your message. Your stillness becomes your reply, and your restraint becomes your greatest expression of self-mastery. There is a quiet dignity in silence. A dignity that cannot be taken away by insult, rejection, or misunderstanding. It is a power rooted deep within, a power that has nothing to prove and everything to preserve. So let the world misunderstand you. Let them assume weakness in your silence. That is their error to carry, not yours. You know what you are holding within. You know what you are capable of. You know that silence is not emptiness. It is stored energy, sharpened perception, and sacred power. Remember, the lion does not roar at every passing creature. It watches, it waits, it moves when necessary, and when it does, the forest listens. Be like this. Hold your strength in silence. Let it grow. Let it become unshakable, and when the moment calls, let it speak. Not through words, but through presence. Through silence, we observe what noise conceals. Noise is everywhere. It fills our homes, our streets, our thoughts. Constant chatter, endless information, opinions layered over emotions. This is the landscape in which most people live. But within all this noise, something essential is lost: clarity. It is only in silence that we begin to see what has always been there, hidden behind the veil of sound and distraction. Noise distracts, but silence reveals. The mind, when surrounded by noise, becomes reactive. It jumps from thought to thought, emotion to emotion. In such a state, there is no space to see clearly. Reactions dominate, patterns repeat, and the individual lives more as a reflection of the world than as an expression of the self. But when silence is embraced, not merely as an absence of sound, but as a way of being, a shift happens. Observation deepens, awareness sharpens, truth begins to rise. In silence, we begin to see what noise has hidden. We notice our own tendencies. We see how quickly we judge, how often we react, how much we carry from yesterday into today. In the noise, we are distracted from our inner life. In silence, we return to it. A person living in noise lives in reflex, but the one who lives in silence dwells in reflection, and from reflection, transformation is born. This is why silence is essential on the path to inner mastery. It becomes the mirror that no longer distorts, the still surface that shows the face behind the mask. Think of the forest. When you first enter, the birds fly, the animals scatter. Everything seems still. But wait, be silent, be present, and soon life emerges, the animals come back, the sounds shift from disturbance to harmony. In the same way, the mind, when met with silence, begins to reveal what was always there but unseen. Fears, attachments, insights, peace, all become visible when noise is removed. It takes courage to sit in silence, because silence does not allow you to hide. In noise, you can cover your anxiety with laughter, your confusion with words, your emptiness with activity. But silence reveals what is beneath, and this is why many fear it, not because silence is empty, but because it is honest. Silence strips away performance. It asks nothing of you but truth, and that truth may be uncomfortable. But within it lies the seed of awakening, when you can sit silently with yourself, without running, without speaking, without needing. Then you begin to meet the real self, not the self formed by opinions or expectations, but the self untouched by noise. Let this be your practice. Do not simply remove sound, remove hurry, remove the need to explain yourself, remove the need to constantly be understood, and watch how your perception changes, watch how your mind quiets, watch how the world begins to open itself in new and unexpected ways. Because in silence, you begin to notice the subtle, the shift in someone's tone, the feeling beneath their words, the truth behind your own emotions. These things are drowned in noise, but silence sharpens your sight. It makes you attentive, aware, awake. The one who lives in silence begins to read between the lines of life. They no longer need to be told everything. They see, they sense, they feel. This level of awareness is not available to the noisy mind. It is the fruit of consistent inward turning, of listening without interruption, of observing without reacting. So, stop trying to speak your way to understanding, listen your way there. Stop trying to prove your strength by shouting. Reveal your strength by observing. Let the noise of the world pass through you like wind through trees, without disturbing your root. The observer in silence becomes the master of attention, and the master of attention becomes the master of life. This is not an exaggeration. This is truth. In the end, know this. The answers you seek are not hidden from you. They are hidden within you, and to reach them, you do not need more information, more noise, or more opinions. You need silence, true silence, the kind that holds space for truth to surface and for wisdom to enter. Noise can be manipulated, but silence is pure. When you learn to sit with it, walk with it, live with it, you begin to see clearly, and what you see cannot be unseen. It changes how you move, how you speak, how you live. Through silence, we observe what noise conceals, and in that observation we awaken. In silence, the ego dissolves and clarity rises. The ego thrives in noise. It feeds on recognition, applause, defense, and reaction. It is sustained by the constant need to assert identity. I am this, I am right, I must be heard. But when silence is chosen, the ego finds no stage. It cannot perform in emptiness. It cannot echo in stillness. And so, it begins to dissolve. This dissolution is not an act of destruction, but of unveiling. What remains when the ego fades is not a void, it is clarity. A clarity that was always there, buried beneath layers of opinion, fear, pride, and self-image. Silence is the inner fire that burns those layers away, not violently, but gently, persistently. When one enters into real silence, not just the absence of external sound, but the stilling of internal chatter, something extraordinary begins to unfold. A deeper awareness rises. You begin to see life not through the tinted glass of ego, but through the transparent clarity of presence. This is where true perception is born. The ego is always in a hurry. It wants to speak before it listens. It wants to react before it understands. But silence slows everything down. It introduces pause, and in that pause, the ego is disarmed. It cannot operate in spaces where nothing is demanded, where no validation is needed, where no argument is fought. Silence becomes the still surface where the turbulent identity has no reflection. Consider this: when someone offends you, it is the ego that reacts. It is the ego that feels the need to restore a bruised image. But when you are silent, not from suppression, but from awareness, you allow the initial wave to rise and fall without being pulled under. You witness the ego, but you do not become it. In that witnessing, the grip of ego begins to loosen. Many seek clarity through more thinking, but thinking from the ego only produces more confusion. The mind spins endlessly in its own narratives, seeking confirmation of its own importance, but clarity does not arise from mental noise. It arises from silent observation, from stillness that listens not just to the world, but to the soul. Silence is the space in which illusions are seen for what they are. In the absence of needing to prove yourself, you begin to understand who you truly are. Not the name, not the role, not the past, but the aware presence behind it all. This realization does not shout, it dawns, it appears like light at sunrise, subtle, natural, and quietly transformative. To reach this point, one must endure the discomfort that silence initially brings, because silence exposes what noise masks. It brings the ego's games to light. It reveals the fears that drive us, the stories we tell to feel significant. But do not run from this revelation. Stay, witness, let it pass through, and see what remains. What remains is still, it is vast, it is enough, and from this space clarity rises, not as something you acquire, but as something that was always present beneath the noise. A person who has dissolved ego through silence becomes calm, not cold, present, not passive, aware, not aloof. They respond with precision because there is no longer interference from wounded identity. Their clarity is not forced, it is their natural state, uncovered. Do not mistake this clarity for detachment. It is not disconnection from the world, but deeper connection to it. When ego is quiet, you no longer see others through the lens of threat or comparison. You see them as they are. You listen without preparing your defense. You speak without needing validation. You act without seeking applause. This is the power of clarity born from silence. So each day, gift yourself a moment of deep silence. Let the layers peel back. Let the ego dissolve a little more. Let the stillness cleanse you. You may feel raw at first, exposed without the armor of ego, but eventually you will feel free, light, grounded in something far deeper than identity. In this state, decisions become clear. Relationships become clearer. Your own purpose begins to reveal itself, not because someone tells you, but because in silence, you begin to hear the inner voice that has been whispering all along. Remember, ego shouts, but truth whispers, and to hear that whisper, you must become still. When you do, you will discover a clarity so profound, so gentle, so powerful, that it needs no explanation. It simply is. And from that place, you begin to live, not as an image, not as a reaction, but as awareness itself. Responding with silence teaches discipline of the spirit. Discipline is not simply the regulation of physical habits or the repetition of routines. True discipline arises when the spirit is governed by awareness, when one acts not out of compulsion, but out of clarity. And among all the disciplines available to human beings, of speech, of time, of effort, there is one that rises above them in subtlety and power, the discipline of silence. To respond with silence is to restrain the immediate and allow the essential to surface. It is to step back when the ego wants to step forward. It is to breathe when the instinct is to burst. It is to observe when everything within you wants to correct, to argue, to react. This is not easy. That is why it is called discipline. The spirit, untamed, is like a flame in the wind, dancing wildly, flaring up at every provocation. But silence is the stillness that contains the fire, that allows it to provide warmth without destruction. It gives shape to your power, it channels your energy inward before it moves outward. In this way, silence becomes the forge where the discipline of the spirit is tempered. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you deepen your inner foundation. Not because you are weak or afraid, but because you are prioritizing depth over display. The one who rushes to reply is often governed by pride or fear. The one who holds silence, however, is led by self-command. That person is not empty of words, they are full of restraint. You are not born with this capacity, it is trained, it is shaped through experience, awareness, and repetition. It begins with a pause, that sacred pause between stimulus and response. In that space, you meet yourself. You see the desire to defend, to strike, to prove. But instead of obeying it, you sit with it. You hold it like a teacher holds a difficult lesson, and slowly it changes you. Do not confuse this kind of silence with suppression. Suppression hides, but disciplined silence observes. Suppression builds tension, silence releases it through still presence. You do not swallow your voice in weakness. You place it gently aside, like a sword returned to its sheath, not because it lacks sharpness, but because the warrior has chosen peace. The discipline of silence builds many inner virtues. It strengthens patience, because you must wait. It refines humility, because you let go of being right. It cultivates wisdom, because you listen longer and speak less, and it builds endurance, because you withstand the discomfort of not having the final word. Look around you. The world teaches us to react quickly, to win arguments, to post replies, to speak faster than we think. But what if you could retrain your reflexes? What if you could respond, not from the conditioned mind, but from the quiet strength of your spirit? That is the practice of silent discipline. Each time you choose silence in the face of chaos, you are rewriting the story of your inner world. You are teaching yourself that not all energy must be spent, that not every invitation to conflict must be accepted, that real power is not found in dominating others, but in mastering yourself. This path is not for the impatient. It is not for those who crave applause. It is for those who understand that greatness is born in moments unseen, that mastery is formed not in performance, but in the quiet decisions made when no one is watching, when the voice rises and you choose the breath instead, when the insult lands and you choose your stillness over retaliation. The spirit, when disciplined through silence, becomes light. It no longer carries the burden of every word spoken in haste, every argument entered in pride, every reaction made in fear. It becomes focused, like a blade sharpened through friction and care, and in this space you grow not just in control but in understanding. You begin to see the pain behind others' words, the insecurity behind their attacks, the chaos behind their drama, and you choose not to add to it. You walk your path, quiet, clear, committed. Let this be your strength, to respond with silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you have everything to protect. Your peace, your clarity, your integrity. Silence, chosen consciously, becomes your spiritual armor. It shields without blocking, it reflects without resisting, and most importantly, it teaches. It teaches you how to govern yourself when the world tries to dictate your state. This is the highest discipline, not of the body, but of the spirit. Silence transforms reaction into conscious response. Between what happens to us and how we respond, there is a space. In that space lies our power. The undisciplined mind collapses that space into an instant reaction, but the cultivated mind, the silent mind, stretches that space until it becomes wide enough to contain awareness. And in that awareness, the reaction dissolves, and something else takes its place. Response. Reaction is the language of the unconscious. It is fast, unfiltered, emotional. It is the body and the ego acting before the soul can speak. But silence disrupts this automatic reflex. It places a gentle hand between the spark and the flame. It invites us to see clearly, to feel fully, and to choose wisely. Let us be clear. Reaction is easy. It is instinctive. You feel offended. You defend. You feel hurt. You retaliate. You feel misunderstood. You explain yourself endlessly. But this is how we live as slaves to circumstance, always being pulled, always being shaped by the external, never truly free. But then comes silence, not as a forced stillness, but as a sacred presence. Silence slows you down. It arrests the motion of the reactive mind. It holds you in that narrow moment of tension and expands it into a realm of possibility. Within that realm, you begin to observe. You observe your breath, shallow or deep. You observe your body, tense or relaxed. You observe your thoughts, stormy or calm, and in doing so, you move from being inside the reaction to witnessing it. And when you witness something, you are no longer owned by it. This witnessing gives birth to response. Response is never rushed. It is considered, intentional and clear. It arises from awareness, not emotion, from understanding, not impulse, from maturity, not habit. And this transformation, from reaction to response, is the mark of an awakened human being. Think of it like this: a bell that is struck rings automatically. It cannot choose its sound or volume. It reacts to the force applied to it. But a flute, held by a skilled musician, chooses when and how it sings. The breath, the pause, the pressure, all are intentional. Silence makes you the musician, not the bell. Each time you respond instead of react, you reclaim your freedom. You are no longer a puppet pulled by invisible strings of emotion. You are the one holding the strings, directing your own state. This is not just self-control, it is self-leadership. Now, this practice is not comfortable. To pause in the heat of emotion takes courage. To hold silence when your pride screams to be heard requires strength. But with each choice to remain silent in the face of provocation, your ability to respond consciously becomes stronger. And soon, what once triggered you no longer touches you. Silence is not avoidance. It is attention. It is the sharpening of perception so that you may see the truth behind the moment. What is really being said? What is really being asked of you? What is truly necessary here? Silence gives you the time to answer these questions before you act. This is how leaders are formed. This is how healers speak. This is how the wise walk among the chaotic. They respond not from ego but from insight, not from defense but from depth. Their silence does not mean absence, it means presence, a powerful presence that listens deeply, sees clearly, and moves precisely. So, the next time you feel the fire of reaction rising, do not suppress it, witness it, breathe, feel the tension, step back into silence. Even a few seconds of stillness can change everything. In those seconds, you go from being acted upon to becoming the actor. And with practice, this becomes your nature. You become the calm in the storm, the pause in the noise, the space in the conflict where peace is possible. People may not understand your silence, but they will feel its effect. They will feel the difference in your presence, and that presence, shaped by silence, will influence more than 1,000 words ever could. Remember, anyone can react, but the one who learns to respond, through silence, becomes a master of themselves. And in mastering yourself, you begin to master life. Those who master silence become unshakable. In a world where everything moves at high speed, words, emotions, opinions, expectations, it is easy to become unsteady. Many live like leaves in the wind, tossed by the mood of others, by the weight of circumstances, by the uncertainty of their own emotions. They are loud outside but fragile inside. Yet there exists a different kind of human being, calm, grounded, unbothered by noise. These are the ones who have mastered silence, and because of that they are unshakable. To be unshakable does not mean you feel nothing. It means you are not ruled by what you feel. It does not mean you escape the storms of life. It means you no longer panic when they arrive. And this steadiness, this internal mountain-like presence is not a gift. It is a result of discipline cultivated through silence. Silence strengthens your foundation. It deepens your roots. When you no longer need to explain yourself, when you no longer rush to defend your image, when you can stand quietly in your truth without forcing others to see it, you become untouchable by external chaos. Think of the mountain again. Lightning may strike it, rains may fall, wind may howl, but it does not move. The mountain is not hardened by arrogance. It is grounded in depth. So too is the individual who has cultivated the practice of silence. They may feel the weather of the world, but they remain unmoved in their core. Their clarity is not disturbed by the confusion of others. Their purpose is not swayed by applause or criticism. Their peace is not dependent on being understood. But how does one reach such a state? Through silence, not silence of the mouth alone, but silence of the heart and mind, the kind of silence that listens to insult and does not rush to protect the ego, the kind that hears misunderstanding and does not need to interrupt with clarification, the kind that walks through conflict with presence rather than noise. This silence does not come easily. It requires you to face discomfort, to sit with the rising heat of unspoken words, to embrace the stillness when your conditioning tells you to react. It is a training of the highest order, not of muscles, but of mind, not of posture, but of presence. And as this silence deepens, something powerful happens. You begin to see the world more clearly. You begin to recognize how little of what disturbs others actually touches your true self. You realize that the noise around you is a reflection of other people's storms, not your own. And you stop absorbing it. You stop reacting to it. You carry your own weather within. To be unshakable is not to be perfect. It is to be deeply anchored, anchored in values, anchored in truth, anchored in the awareness that nothing outside you has the power to define your worth. And silence becomes your constant companion, a quiet guardian of your peace. People may misread your silence. They may think you are passive, indifferent, or weak. Let them. The oak tree does not shrink because the passing bird calls it lifeless. It continues to grow in silence, in strength, in stillness. So must you. Do not argue with noise. Rise above it through presence. Let your silence become your strength. Let it refine your thoughts. Let it settle your emotions. Let it remind you that stillness is not stagnation. It is alignment. And aligned people are not shaken easily. Eventually, you will face trials that test you. Loss, betrayal, misunderstanding, injustice. But if you have trained in silence, you will move through these trials with dignity. You will bleed, but not break. You will bend, but not fall. You will feel, but you will not be thrown into confusion. That is the power of silence. It builds within you a center so firm, so grounded, that even when everything around you collapses, you remain. This is the final gift of silence, not just peace, not just clarity, but unshakable presence. A presence that transforms rooms, heals tension, calms the anxious, and inspires without words. A presence that needs no defense, no decoration, no approval. So walk your path, speak when needed, act when called. But never abandon your silence. It is your anchor, your compass, your quiet power. The world does not need more noise. It needs more steady, silent, unshakable souls. Be one of them. The power of sacred silence. There comes a time on every seeker's path when words are no longer enough. When explanations, arguments, and reactions lose their appeal. When the noise outside becomes too chaotic and the noise within too tiring. And in that moment, you begin to sense the invitation, not to speak, but to listen. Not to fight, but to observe. Not to prove, but to become still. This is the call of silence, and those who answer it begin to transform. They discover that silence is not an absence of power, but its highest expression. That it is not a retreat from life, but a deeper entry into it. A silent mind is a focused mind. A quiet response is a conscious choice. A withheld reaction is a mark of spiritual strength. In silence, the ego cannot survive, and when the ego dissolves, clarity rises like the morning sun through mist. You begin to see clearly, not just the world, but yourself. You recognize your patterns. You meet your emotions. You no longer live on the surface of reaction, but in the depth of response. You become disciplined, not through punishment, but through presence. Your silence becomes your training ground. Each moment you choose not to react, you strengthen the spirit. Each time you resist the impulse to be heard, you develop quiet courage, and in that courage your roots grow deeper. Silence reveals what noise conceals. The truth behind words, the pain behind anger, the insecurity behind arrogance. You begin to listen more, not just to others but to life, and in that listening, wisdom awakens, and with wisdom comes stillness. Not stagnation, but inner stability, the kind of stability that no insult can shake, no praise can inflate, the kind of stability that stands like a mountain amid the winds of opinion, judgment, and uncertainty. This is the path of the unshakable, the one who responds with silence, not because they have no words, but because their presence speaks louder, the one who remains calm not because they feel nothing, but because they've trained not to be ruled by what they feel. So now, as you walk forward in life, carry this silence with you. Let it be the space between your breath and your words. Let it be the pause between their action and your response. Let it be the strength that grounds you when the world tries to pull you into its storms. Because in this silence, you will remember you were never here to echo the noise of the world. You were here to bring the stillness that heals it.